Over the last 3.5 years, the government's mishandling of Brexit has delivered nothing but political gridlock, chaos and economic uncertainty. It's paralysed our political system, divided communities and nations, and become a national embarrassment on an unprecedented scale. We recognise the clear message from the British public last week, however they voted in the referendum of 2016, and understand their determination to end the never-ending cycle of the Brexit debate and get back to solving the day-to-day issues that challenge them in their daily lives. So we must listen and understand that we cannot go on forever debating what happened in 2016, and we have to respect that decision and move on. However, Mr. Speaker, understanding all this doesn't mean that we as a party and a movement should abandon our basic principles or ever give up the demand for a fairer and more just society. We warned before the general election the Prime Minister's Brexit deal was a terrible deal for our country, and we still believe it's a terrible deal today. I'll give way later on. It will not protect or strengthen our rights, or support our manufacturing industry, or our vital trading relationships, or protect our natural world in a time of unprecedented climate crisis. Neither will it address the deep inequality in our system or secure the interests of every nation and region in the United Kingdom. Instead, under the Conservatives, this deal will be used as a battering ram to drive us down the path of yet more deregulation and towards a toxic deal with Donald Trump that will sell out our National Health Service and push up the price of medicines to benefit US drug corporations. It will take us away from the essential principles we believe in of a country that looks after everybody and protects those communities left behind by the excesses of the free market. This deal does not bring certainty for communities or for business or the workforce. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it does the opposite and hardwires the risk of a no-deal Brexit next year. I'm sure that will delight many members on the benches opposite, but not those who suffer the consequences in communities and workplaces all across the country. That is why Labour will not support this bill. As we remain certain there is a better and fairer way for this country to leave the European Union. One which would not risk ripping our communities apart, selling out our public services, or sacrificing hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process. This deal is a roadmap for the reckless direction in which the government and our Prime Minister are determined to take our country. They have done their utmost to hide the likely impact and continue to use gimmicks and slogans to turn attention away from their real intentions.
For the right honourable gentleman, but surely the people have voted in a general election and supported the Prime Minister's deal. As a Democrat, surely he should heed the people.
I'm disappointed in the honourable member. He clearly... But in the spirit of Christmas, I wish him well. He hasn't been listening to what I've said. Mr. Speaker, on the questions, and nothing exposes this government's intentions more clearly than the steps they've already taken on workers' rights. For all the promises over the past few weeks that they are the party to protect rights at work, at the very first opportunity, they've removed the basic provisions they said would be part of this bill. That does not bode well for the separate bill the Prime Minister is now saying he will bring forward on workers' rights. If he wants to assure people that their rights are safe in his hands... If he wants to assure people that their rights are safe in his hands, he should commit to legislate to ensure workers' rights in Britain will never fall behind the European Union standards in the future, and support amendments to enshrine this commitment within this bill. Yes.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. We are all concerned in this House with workers' rights. And indeed on the rights of those who are approaching retirement. He put his policy to the British people, in as much as anyone could discern it, in a general election. He was slaughtered. What bit of that message does he not understand?
The Prime Minister, your leader, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker, said the workers' rights were going to be protected. They are not in this bill. So, Mr. Speaker,
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Isn't the whole point of this that this withdrawal agreement seems to be diminishing every time? The previous Prime Minister, the right honourable member for Maidenhead deal, this is worse than that. The one that we had before the election, there's things that have vanished. It's not only workers' rights that are being downgraded here, it's parliamentarians' rights, because the ability of the legislature to scrutinise the executive has been taken away here. It's bad for democracy.
Thank my friend for the intervention. She's absolutely correct on what she says. And then, Mr. Speaker, I now move on to what I think is one of the most appalling sections of this bill and what the Prime Minister has presented to us this morning. I want to make it clear that I see the government's removal of the protections in this bill for unaccompanied children seeking asylum as nothing short of an absolute disgrace and a piece of dishonesty towards those people who at the moment are clearly very, very concerned. Throughout the last Parliament and for his whole life, and I was talking to him last night, my good friend Lord Dubs has worked tirelessly to ensure children affected by the worst aspects of global injustice can be given sanctuary in this country. Now, this government, in its first week in office, has ripped up those very hard-won commitments. This is a move the director of the charity Safe Passage has described, and I quote, as truly shocking, saying it could have, and I quote again, potentially tragic consequences. I simply say this, Mr. Speaker, coming up to Christmas, shame on this government for abandoning children in this way. Mr. Speaker, on the environment and food safety standards, this deal points to a complete realignment towards the far weaker protections and standards that operate in the United States. If this government is set on pursuing a trade deal with the United States, with President Trump, with precious few bargaining chips to hand, the brutal reality is that Britain will have to lower its standards. That is the brutal reality of it. The European Union has made it clear that a future trade deal with the European Union will depend on maintaining a level playing field on standards and protections. So the choice we now face is between keeping the highest environmental and food standards in order to get a future trade deal with the European Union, or slashing food standards to match those of the United States, where there are so-called acceptable levels of rat hairs in paprika, maggots in orange juice. It's true. If members think this is a piece of imagination on my part, when I was first told this, I also thought that cannot be the case. I checked out, and it absolutely is. We are about to strike a new race to the bottom in a deal with the United States, and I think everyone should be aware and warned of that. Mr. Speaker, turning to the arrangements with Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister has emphatically claimed, and I quote his own words, there will be no checks between Northern Ireland and GB. And that, again I quote, we have a deal that keeps the whole of the UK together as we come out of the EU. These claims are simply not true. We know from the analysis carried out by his own Treasury that under his deal there will be, in fact, an abundance of checks and customs declarations in the Irish Sea. Not only will this have a huge impact on Northern Ireland businesses and society, it will also have implications for the rest of Britain's economy and manufacturing industry. The Treasury's own analysis spells it out. The more the government diverges from the EU trading regulations in the future, the more checks and disruptions will be put in place between Britain and our biggest trading partner. More checks, more disruption is deeply damaging to our trade and for our manufacturing sector, threatens taking a wrecking ball to our vital supply chains and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that rely on them. Car manufacturers, chemical industry, all those that rely on just-in-time supply chains will feel a devastating impact from all this. This makes it even more incredible that since agreeing its deal, the government has yet to produce one single bit of evidence or analysis to show it will have a positive impact on the economy or our communities in any way. I say to all members, new and old, that it is our job in Parliament to question, to scrutinise and to hold the government to account day to day. If we believe the government is taking the wrong approach, we should never be afraid to oppose. And when it comes to our future relationship with the European Union and the rest of the world, we cannot let this government act in an undemocratic and secretive way. Trade deals with the EU and the United States, or anybody else for that matter, must be done transparently. This country is about, Mr. Speaker, to embark on a major change of direction. As we leave a 40-year economic partnership for an unknown future under the terms of the withdrawal deal, we need, Mr. Speaker, an approach that puts jobs and living standards first and builds the strongest cooperation with our European neighbours, based on openness, solidarity and internationalism. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the approach that will bring an end to the Brexit crisis and bring our country together.
Dr. Liam Fox.
They don't share a one. Yeah.